Ahoy there! I'm Captain Lauren Morgans from the tall ship Kalmar Nyckel. I've been asked to talk with you today about risk. I deal with risk all the time as the captain of a tall ship. On the Kalmar Nyckel, we sail with an all-volunteer crew. We carry up to 49 passengers. Sometimes we sail out onto the open ocean, and I'm responsible for making sure we all come home safely. So I thought I might share with you some of my insights about risk and how to manage it. Let's start with a basic definition of the term. Risk means the possibility of suffering a loss, damage, or harm. It also means exposure to uncertain danger. If you think about it, everything we do carries some amount of risk, some exposure to uncertain danger, some possibility of harm. In fact, the modern concept of risk comes originally from the Italian word riscare, which means to dare. Sailing the Kalmar Nyckel out on long voyages into the open ocean and handling a big ship in a narrow waterway can be pretty daring, and both are great examples of the element of risk. Risk is a fact of life. You can't cross the street without taking a little bit of a risk. But there are ways that you can manage or lower that risk so that in the end, you'll probably be okay. On the Kalmar Nyckel, I ask myself, how can I sail the ship in ways that reduce the risk involved? What steps can I take to minimize any potential danger? Here, I always think of two things. First, how do I prevent a problem from happening in the first place? Which is to say, how might I eliminate the risk altogether? Second, since it's impossible to eliminate all potential dangers, how do I lessen the amount of damage that might result from any accident that might happen? In other words, how do I reduce the harm caused by a problem once it has occurred, or even better, while it is occurring? A good example is a fire on the ship. Fires at sea are very serious because you can't just run outside and call the fire department. At sea, not only is there no fire department, there isn't even anywhere to run. So, we try hard not to let any fires start in the first place. We don't have candles or other open flame on the ship, and the cook never leaves anything unattended on the stove. But we know that fires can still happen, whether from our breakfast cooking, or from the engines, or from the electronics. So, we have smoke detectors and heat sensing alarms to tell us if a fire is beginning, and we have 18 fire extinguishers and 2 fire hoses to put one out. That way, even if a fire does start, we have a fighting chance of putting it out before we all have to go for a swim. Another important question to consider is whether a risk we're taking is likely to be worth it in the end. Why are we taking this risk? What are we getting out of our adventure? Are we crossing the street to go to the ice cream store? One way to think about this is to use what is called a cost-benefit analysis. That's a fancy way of getting us to ask, what are the possible costs of an activity we want to do? How risky is it? And what are the possible benefits from taking that risk? What might we gain from it? Then we ask, do the costs outweigh the benefits? Or do the benefits outweigh the costs? It's a balancing test. You can try this using an example of a risk you take. Maybe playing baseball or riding the school bus. Add up the costs on one side of a piece of paper and the benefits on the other and see what you get. Which side outweighs the other, costs or benefits? For me, I'm going to take an example from the Kalmar Nyckel. Let's say it's September, the beginning of the Kalmar Nyckel's fall education season. We want to go sailing. It's fun, rewarding, a challenge, and we educate students about what life was like back in the age of sail, before you could cross oceans with airplanes or even with ships that had engines. But September is also the height of the hurricane season, I probably don't need to tell you that hurricanes are very dangerous for ships. So, what are the benefits of going sailing in September? Well, school has started, so it's a good time for classes to come for field trips. Except for the possible hurricanes, the weather is often nice for sailing. Not too hot, not too cold, just the right amount of wind. The more sails we schedule, the more classes can come out and experience the ship. On the other hand, what are the possible costs? Well, the biggest one, of course, is that we might get hit by a hurricane. That could wreck us, or sink us, or damage the ship or the people in some way. We really don't want to get hit by a hurricane. Here's a second cost, which might not be so obvious. If a class plans to come sailing and a hurricane is coming, we would have to tell them that they can't come because it's too dangerous. Then, maybe they would be upset because their field trip got ruined and they wouldn't want to come again. So, should we go sailing in September? Back to that word riscare, to dare. We know the benefits are pretty great, but do we dare brave those hurricanes? Well, maybe we can look again at our costs and see if we can go about managing the risk. I think we can all agree that a hurricane is a bad thing to get caught in. But since we're sailing in the 21st century and not the 17th, we have lots of tools that can help us prevent that from happening. We have meteorologists whose job is to study the weather using data from weather stations, satellites, airplanes, weather balloons. They know if a hurricane is coming before it gets to Delaware. So maybe if we check the hurricane forecast each day, we can plan in advance and move the ship to a safe harbor before a hurricane comes. And even though a school group might be disappointed if they didn't get to come sailing, if you think about it, they probably don't really want to go out in a hurricane anyway. Besides, if we don't schedule sails in September because we might have to cancel them, the result is even worse. No one gets to go sailing in September ever. So I think the benefits outweigh the costs, and we definitely do dare to sail during the hurricane season. We can afford to be daring because we are careful and safe, and because we use the tools available to us to manage that risk. Thanks for taking the time to think about risk with me. Risk management and cost-benefit analyses are some of the most useful thinking tools that I have to help me do my job, so it's fun to be able to share them with all of you. I hope you'll come visit us on the Kalmar Nyckel someday soon. Check the weather report before you come, and maybe we can talk some more about risk. This is Captain Lauren from the Kalmar Nyckel signing off. Good luck, and risk wisely.